Uh, Graham, you as a leadership guru have contributed a chapter to this middle management paper from the Future Work Forum. And your take on middle management in its future seems to me to be very positive. You say there really is a future for these people in the middle of organizations. Can you explain a bit more your thinking behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you think about leadership, it's obviously contextual. So, we have to think about the world we live in today. And I think, we're in a world where the pace of change is so fast that it's really difficult to keep up with it. So you hear all these wonderful phrases like VUCA, don't you, and Banny and things like that. And I translate that really to a single word which is clarity. And I think a lot of organizations, certainly the C-suite and SLT teams I'm working with, I think what they struggle with is, they create a wonderful strategy, a wonderful plan sometimes, but maybe just a strategy. But the difficulty is executing it. How it's very easy to actually create one, but how do we execute? And I think for me, the middle management in any organization really is the translator of the plan and the strategy into something that's meaningful. So I think there really is a role for, it might be a diluted number, let's say, but I think there's definitely a role for middle managers to be able to understand the context, the big picture, understand what the purpose and the vision of the organization is, and then understand and be part of co-creating that strategy, but then to translate that into action. So I think that's probably me, the sort of where I think the key bit is often missing. I don't think we've developed middle managers or leaders to be able to do that effectively. I think we see them as people as custodians of the plan and the process and auditing and things like that. So I think that's where I see it in today's world.
Yeah, the traditional view is they're kind of glorified administrators, just carrying out the actions of the C-suite. But in practice, as you say, they often have to translate the strategy into action.
Mm.
But obviously, organizations are evolving, they're becoming flatter, the middle is being squeezed out
Yeah,
in some
yeah.
places. So does that change the role of the middle manager significantly?
I think it does. I think, so what I'm seeing is, certainly when we work with senior teams and then we work with the middle management team, is that they're being asked to do more from less. They, seem to have a lot more people reporting to them. So I think it becomes a challenge really in terms of, what they were good at in the old world is not always relevant now. So we almost have to help them to unlearn what they did in the past and what got them to where they are now, to then start to see the world differently and start to build a different set of skill sets. So I think even in a flatter organization, you still need those translators. You still need those people who enable teams to be successful. You still need your leaders, managers, and coaches. It's not, we're going to get rid of managers. I think we still need management. I think we still need great leadership, and we also need people who can coach and develop and mentor and create a high performance culture really within organizations. So yeah, definitely, I think I see a role for them going forward.
Do you see that the existing group of middle managers are competent in these areas, given that they're challenging some of those coaching, mentoring skills, for
Mm.
example, that may not have been that prevalent in the past? Do you see that the current group of middle managers are able to make that change?
I think they've really been developed for a world that doesn't exist anymore. So I think if I go back to education, and how we're educated, we were educated for a world that doesn't exist anymore. So predictability, stability, manage the process. You were good at your job, so you got promoted, and if you needed help, you'd speak to your line manager, and they knew your job inside out, and things weren't changed very much. And we use those dreaded things called appraisals and annual reports and school reports, all those sort of things that came into place in the old world, which aren't really relevant anymore because things are changing so fast. So we need a new set of skills really to be able to cope with the context we're actually in. So I think adaptability is a big one. How do we help managers become more resilient? I think a lot of people, the phrase change management is almost like dead now, isn't it? Because it's almost like, yes, we will change things, but it's more about, continuous change. It's not blocks of change like it used to be. So I think a lot of managers were very good, technical experts, subject matter experts, get promoted into a role, and now they're having to think more in a system approach. They're trying to break down the silos. You mentioned there about getting flatter, which means that I don't just stick in my subject matter expert area. I'm going to work in a team one approach, I guess, which is thinking what's best for the organization rather than what's just best for my function. So I think that we developed them for this environment that doesn't exist. So I think we definitely need to help them to unlearn, to help them have the right structures and processes and skill sets, but also mindset's probably a big one. So I think we need to re-educate them around that to help them to thrive. I see a lot of middle managers who I coach. They're overwhelmed, stressed, fed up, exhausted, on the brink of leaving and all that sort of stuff, and I've had enough sort of thing. And I don't think it's their fault. I think it's just they haven't got the skill sets to be able to thrive in today's environment. So I think that's where we need to look at is, they're not failing in any way, really. They just haven't really recognised or been developed for the context we're actually operating in.
We're also this phase of change, aren't we, where we've still got the old hierarchical structures with the command and control systems
Yeah.
in them, and we're then weeding out some levels of middle management and saying now we're much more networked and flexible and agile, but actually we aren't really.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so they kind of struggle with still the old way of working whilst being expected to do the new. Are we just going through a transition stage right now where that translates into the stress you see when you're coaching people? And will we get through that, do you think?
Well, that goes back to that, lack of clarity, isn't it? Really, I think that's the issue. Really, is what's expected of me now. And I think the challenge we got is that if you were to start a business now, you'd probably create a business in a completely different way than some of the well-known brands and global businesses that are out there. And they're struggling with a system that worked in the old world when the pace of change was quite slow. Command and control worked fine. It worked okay. We got good results. But now we're having to transition into a bit of both, really. I always think it's an and situation where we still need control of our organisation. So I think leadership teams are moving from command and control to more about direction and enablement and empowerment. I always say that empowerment needs direction, autonomy, and support. So the shift that's got to happen there. A lot of organisations I work with is the senior teams struggle to let go. They say they empower the middle managers, but they don't really. You're empowered till something goes wrong, and then you're disempowered very quickly. So there's some learning that needs to happen at all levels, really, around how do we run an organisation in a less command and control way, but still remain control, because obviously we've got that legal responsibility to make the right decisions. But then how do we get a group of enablers and change-ready people who embrace change consistently and have the skills, the mindsets and structures to be able to operate in a new world? So, empowerment is not application, is it? It's really, you still need that clarity and that framework to work. So I think it's a hybrid version. I think it's a bit of, the question for me is how do we keep control of the business and empower our staff, not how do we just empower our staff? Because I've seen it happen sometimes when the pendulum swings too far and it goes completely decentralized, and then after a period of time you've got chaos and people running off doing their own things and difficulty in making decisions, so it all slows down, and then they'll get another consulting and think, oh, what you need is a bit more control. so they then spend the next 2 years, 2 years trying to put control mechanisms in and processes in, and that didn't work either. So I think the sweet spot is organizations say, look, okay, well, we're not going to get rid of a hierarchy. We're not going to get rid of a command and control overnight. We're on a journey, but what's the sweet spot? How do we have almost like a guiding? I think what Sir John Cotton calls it a guiding coalition in the middle there. But then we've got these skill sets that we put together to go out and grab opportunities quickly. So we've got that agility, but we've also still got control.
Yeah. But the problem, as I see it, is that you've got the people at the top now came up through a relatively hierarchical command and control system. How did they get to the top? Because they had the competencies at being strong decision makers, not delegating particularly well.
Absolutely.
Leading people who in those days were perhaps happy to be reasonably obedient. and do what they're told. Now we're saying to them, oh, there's a new world. Your people want to be involved. They like to be empowered.
Yeah.
Empowered means you losing power.
Yeah. Yeah.
That for some people works, but
Yeah.
for a lot of leaders doesn't, because I didn't get to where I'm today without having power.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, do
Yeah.
you find as in your development of those managers, there are some that kind of get it and are genuinely prepared to delegate, and others where it's really difficult or impossible?
It's a great observation and a great question. I think you're right. I think certainly at C-suite and SLT level, I think that ability for them to let go is a big shift. And it's like, well, what do I do? Yeah, I spent my life making decisions and solving problems and telling people what to do. What do I now do? And I think that's where that change in mindset really, and you don't get that through PowerPoint slides and courses like that just tell you what to do. It's more about giving them immersive and experiential experiences where they can start to realize actually the world is different and we need to operate in a different way. And actually, lots of them want to be more strategic, don't they, in their thinking. But I often ask the question, have you realized actually you're now paid to think? And how much thinking time is in your diary? What do you mean? I do that on the way to work or in the shower or whatever. And I think so there's a big shift, is there? Almost like a clarification of, well, in this new world, if it is about giving direction and empowerment and autonomy, we're there to support. So how do we align our organization? So I used to talk about a clarity loop of the first stage of alignment, and most businesses are okay at that. They're very good at communicating the strategy, but what they tend to do is once and think they've done it. So that whole process of continually explaining what needs to be done, and the reason why we're doing it, and where we're not competing, and what our proposition, all that good stuff on our values and culture, things like that. But then what they don't do then is really mobilize the middle managers really enough and support them in terms of execution. So you've got masses of change happening in organizations, massive transformational programs, and no one's really been trained in projects or change. I think, well, why wouldn't you do that? Or coaching, for example, it's one of the best tools, isn't it, for changing people's mindsets and helping them to get through change is having great coaches. So I find that quite staggering sometimes, is that we're still trying to operate in this old world where you're just telling people what to do, giving them information, rather than making it more collaborative and more empowering, I guess, and more inclusive. So I think, I think it is a challenge, and I think we do need to. I think I spent most of my time actually initially trying to help leaders to unlearn.
Okay, I was just thinking the same thing, because we had a major intervention called COVID.
Yeah.
Which at one point stopped people in their tracks simply because the world stopped, and made people stop and think about, how do I still continue run my business? How do I continue to motivate people? How, et cetera, and a lot of changes in working practice, working remotely from home, technology and so on, suddenly were forced on organizations, whether they wanted them or not. And I thought that was a great wake-up call for some leaders, where they sat back and thought, actually, what is my added value? It did get time to stop and think about strategy because they were forced to. And also forced to challenge some of the conventional thinking about the way we work. One of the disappointing things for me is that meant a lot of organizations became more agile by definition. They were forced to trust and empower their people to work under their own time at home, because and a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders realize that people actually can be trusted, generally speaking. Not everybody all the time, but in general, people, given the responsibility of managing themselves and being judged on results as much as input. So all that stuff happened. Yet I've seen more recently a lot of quite senior visible leaders, without mentioning particular names, forcing their people back to the office because somehow they don't trust them anymore to work from home, or they have the excuse, maybe it's not an excuse, maybe it's a reason, that they want to get everybody back together in teams again. Do you see a kind of a bit of a backward step almost at the moment?
I think there is. I think it's interesting that you said that around COVID, because I think that was a big catalyst, really. And it was very interesting because I actually saw a lot of leadership teams actually starting to come together and work really well together. and they work really well together because they're in a crisis and they need to do command and control. So it was more like, creating war rooms, wasn't it? And almost like hour by hour decisions. And they loved that. So they grabbed all the business. And then obviously a lot of people working from home, and obviously the hybrid working sort of came in. But I think, the backlash of that is they want to get control back. And that's the sad thing, really, is, it was a great opportunity to do something different, wasn't it? And embed it. It's a bit like that change that I call it elastic band change, where you stretch the elastic band, but then it goes back to how it was before. And I think it's such an opportunity that a lot of organisations are missing. And I think redesigning what corporate offices are and head offices are really is quite interesting, because I see them more as collaborative centres now and cultural areas, rather than your desk is at home. If you can do that, of course, if you're manufacturing or whatever, or working in a hospital, whatever, that's completely different. But if you are in a support function or a role within a large organisation, then why would you pay someone to commute for 2 hours and then sit in back-to-back virtual meetings in an office environment when they could have done 2 hours at work already and done all their emails, then done the back-to-back meetings, and then be more effective? And I think sometimes when I'm working with senior teams, and middle managers, I get them once we got that psychological safety in place, I'll ask them to, on a flip chart, just let's write down a crazy list. And then, what do you mean, Grace? Well, all the things that you do in your business which are just crazy, and it is things like that. Forcing people back into work, and appraisals comes up quite a bit. Why do we do annual appraisals, all that sort of stuff, and things like that. Meetings comes up quite a lot, and quite often meetings, they're designed for control, aren't they, rather than for being problem solving or effective and stuff like that. And it amazes me sometimes how many middle managers and senior managers have never been developed or trained about how to run workshops or meetings. And I think that's quite fundamental to be able to do that in your job.
Yeah, but that was another thing about COVID. All of a sudden, people were forced to use Zoom and other forms of virtual meeting. And that made them stop and think about, well, what's a meeting about? I can't now sit around the table with my people. Maybe how can I replicate some of the human stuff? Because the use of the technology, particularly when you're not used to it, can be very mechanical, inhuman. Wait for your turn to speak, kind of. And so there was a learning there. But I think you're right about reacting to a crisis, and a lot of managers are very good when faced with a real problem to sort of step up and do it. And you've got quite a bit of experience being from the military, and I see interesting examples there of, yes, of course, the military always are good at reacting to crisis, but also they're very good at preparing different scenarios for options. One of which has to be, what happens if the command and control system is literally blown away? Can the troops still continue? Do they understand? And I think for people who are non-military, and that's me, the caricature of military command and control is top down and that's it. Actually, my understanding is it is much more to do with giving the maximum information to the people literally at the front, because they may need to react independently. So do you see some of your military experience coming out in helping leaders?
I do. I think it was a great experience in my early career, and they realise that command and control doesn't work, because we don't really know what the enemy's going to do, don't even know who they are and what weapons they're going to use. So organisations like ISIS, for example, are very good at working in cells, and so it wasn't like a battlefield anymore. So it became very agile way of working, and they created a concept called mission command, which is as a senior leader you share the mission. So in business, that will be the purpose, what problems we solve for our customers, why we do what we do, where we want to get to, what the vision is, our values, our goals, and our value proposition, all those strategic things that need to be communicated, but with meaning. And I think that was I always remember a phrase in the literature you taught, which is "in order to." So we're going to do this in order to, and then you have an output, which gave that clarity around, what is it going to do, but also why we're going to do it. And then the idea was that you then, your middle manager, let's say, if I use that phrase, would then go away and work out how they're going to do it. And that worked because of the training structure that was in place. So I could have a team of people in the military. I didn't know who they were, but I could almost like trust them immediately because I knew they'd reached a certain standard, and I know they'd passed out at a certain standard, and I know they could do their job. Obviously, it needs to sort of take into account how they're feeling and injuries and all that sort of stuff, and local situations. But have they operated in the desert, for example, or have they operated in the Arctic before and things like that? But I knew they were at a certain standard. I think in business, you're good at your job, so then you get promoted into being a team leader. No training. Friday you're one of the gang. Monday you're a leader of your mates, and then you're then promoted as you go through, and you almost like even get into like almost like sort of senior leadership levels, without really being developed and thrown into that role. So I think that's one of the things why a lot of organizations struggle with empowerment is that you can't really empower people unless they've got the skill and knowledge to be able to do the job and the right mindset. And I think that's where the military was really good. It was easier for us because you're not operational every single day. Probably more so now in today's world, but certainly back in the day, we spent a lot of time training, a lot of time developing, a lot of time doing scenarios, the what ifs, red teaming stuff, and all that great stuff that we talk about. And we had opportunities to do that, so we knew that we could execute really effectively. So this concept of mission command is really important, but that only works if you've got people that are developed at the right level. I think sadly, as we said before earlier in the video, that a lot of middle managers haven't been developed to do the job they're required to do in today's world. So that's where it often falls down. So then what happens is, things aren't happening. So then the senior leaders need to step in. So then you end up with an organization which is overmanaged, over-controlled, under-led, and people in senior positions getting involved in stuff they shouldn't do. And the reason they get involved in stuff they shouldn't do is because they were good at that. That's why they got promoted.
Yes, and they loved it, and they don't really like being managers and being strategic. They love being at the front. That's what they join the organization.
Like player coaches, aren't they? Sort of thing.
That's it. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I still want to be on the pitch, not.
Well, they call it on the dance floor rather than the balcony. Yeah, that's
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So I think that going back to the point, I think it does help. I think having experienced that and seen that, it does change your mindset and realize actually that there are other ways of doing it. And I work a lot in hospitality and retail, and I see a lot of middle managers that in that world you probably call them area managers. They're running many restaurants or many pubs or whatever or stuff like that, and actually when you look at it, a lot of them are just really expensive general managers, restaurant managers on wheels. So, and they just go around auditing, and not really leading or coaching or developing, and I think that's such a shame. Why would you pay people who are really experienced at running multi-site organization and then force them to go and fill out forms and do auditing when actually they can be a lot more strategic and a lot more add more value if they were allowed to do what they need to do.
And all they actually want to do is be a creative chef in the first place.
That's true. Yeah,
they love doing.
They need more money for the family, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is part of the problem, of course. Hierarchical organisations, as you go up you get paid more. Therefore, obviously, to progress. So, I mean, there are organisations that are better at providing dual career paths where you continue to be an expert.
I'm seeing that a lot more, actually. A lot more skill-based organisations. The military is interesting because that's a hybrid as well. Because I never talked about pay at all when I was in the military because everyone knew what everyone was earning. It's all publicised, and depending on your rank, but you then got extra money for skill sets. If you developed, if you in parachutes or regiment or whatever, or you learn to be a diver or bomb disposal, or certain skill sets, you'd get more money. Or if you were operating, abroad or away from home and things like that. And I think a lot of organisations I'm seeing now are actually looking at it. Why can't I earn the same money as a coder, let's say, in an IT department, as be the chief coder, but have no people report to me, be technically brilliant at my job, and add huge value to the business, but earn the same money as a middle manager or senior manager in the business? Why wouldn't that happen? So I think a lot of organisations are looking at that now, aren't they, and doing that really well.
Yeah, I think, and also the old promote the best coder, or the
Yeah.
best salesman, the best
Yeah.
engineer to be the worst manager.
Yeah.
I think a lot
Yeah.
of organizations have kind of sussed that out. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think particularly now with the kind of or with AI perhaps taking
Yeah.
over some of that administrative stuff
Mm.
anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's more, it's more the human management that is left for the people
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
hence the skills we're talking about in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
empowering and trusting employees and so on.
It's interesting. I personally found it a lot more easy, more natural to work in a more senior leadership role than I did in a management role. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of detailed process and auditing and all that sort of stuff. And and if I'm really honest, I can get bored doing the same thing over and over again, sort of thing. So I found a more natural role for me would have been, in the senior leadership role. But in an old world, I would have never got there.
No, exactly.
Luckily I
So
did. But I had sort of good mentors and good sponsors in the business. But in a traditional organisation, I would never have made it because I would never be on that 9 box model or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But it is interesting because you and I
yeah,
exactly, and I think a number of the other partners in the Future Work Forum have come out of
yeah,
corporate hierarchy, have a
yeah,
set of skills that they can sell. They're lucky enough to be able to sell
yeah,
individually, a
yeah,
lot to do with coaching development and
yeah,
helping others. Um, and yes, it's more of a risk, but there's a time of life often when people can do that because they don't want to continue in the rat race for
yeah,
personal reasons. Again, COVID was a trigger. A lot of
yeah, absolutely.
middle-aged people, middle management, stopped working in corporate and set up their own
Yeah,
business, became a consultant, did whatever, turned a hobby into something that
mm,
pays, that sort of thing.
mm,
So that, in terms of the world of work, it's moving more towards networks of individuals. I mean, the Future Work Forum is maybe a good example
mm,
of people have
yeah,
a common interest. We're not a
yeah,
commercial organization, but we
yeah.
enjoy getting together, sharing ideas. And so, do you see a world more of less hierarchical organizations and more of the kind of network, more the gig economy people talk about?
Yeah.
So, do you see that changing the nature of work and then that feeding back into corporates?
I think so. I think if you I mean, I've not done this, but my gut feel is if you look at a lot of organisations that are failing, they're still stuck in that command and control hierarchy way of working, and the ones that are thriving are the ones that have developed a way of working in a more agile, more flexible, flatter way. In the military, I mentioned there about the training. One of the things we used to train people for was a concept called dislocated expectations, which is you have your plan, but it's going to go wrong, and you know how to react to it and change. But we don't do that. In schools or education, we train people for predictability, so they find it really hard to change. And we need to, I think, develop people who can change effectively. So I think, going back to your question, I think we're going to have to adopt. And I think my daughter's a divisional director for an estate agency, and she's talking about some of the younger people coming on board now, where they're totally different mindsets. They want different things. It's not about commission and money anymore. It's about helping people to move homes, in an emotional way. So it's quite interesting. The purpose piece is coming through a lot more, but almost like what we would probably call a lack of loyalty. They're quite happy to work for 3 or 4. They work in a pub in the evening or whatever, or they'll do the job here and they'll do another job over here, and more of a portfolio sort of type stuff. And I think that's the way it's going, really. And I think we have to recognise that we're bringing up children in a completely different way. So they are. Was it 4 or 5 generations now in the workplace? Aren't we? We're living longer. Less people going to university. There are more people going into jobs straight away, do more apprenticeships and things like that. So I think the place of work is changing, and I think that the mindset I always talk about when I'm developing leaders is it's very easy to fall back on what we call recall memory rather than imagined future. And we tend to rely on our recall memory to solve problems. And a lot of organizations are trying to create a new organization based on recall memory rather than what's going to work in the future. So that whole creative process of getting outside, experience is useful, but actually it can be hindering as well.
Yeah, it's all that. I didn't do that in my day kind of
Yeah,
argument. You know,
yeah. Well, we've
what are these
tried
young
that.
people all
Yeah,
about? You know,
we tried that 20 years ago. Yeah, but 20 years ago it was different.
yes,
That's why it
exactly.
failed.
We tried that, and
Yeah.
it didn't work in the 1960s. Why should it work now?
Well,
Yeah.
you probably remember the big empowerment days, can't you? It was 80s, 90s, wasn't it, where you were wheeled into a room and told you're now empowered. No
Yes.
idea what the strategy was, no idea
No
what
idea.
we,
No, no,
no
but
decision making
yeah,
process.
yes, somebody had been on a 2 day course in empowerment, and they thought they
Yeah,
knew how to do it. Yes.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And you
Okay.
were empowered until you made a mistake, and then you were disempowered very, very quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've all
So,
been.
given that we are seeing quite a bit of change, are
Yeah.
you kind of optimistic about the future for the people who are left in the middle of the organization, middle management, or are you kind of more pessimistic? What's your
I, I'm really excited, really. I think for me, it's a mindset. I'm an optimistic person anyway, and I always look on the bright side of life. And song in there somewhere, isn't there? But I think for me, it's a world of opportunity, and I think those who are willing to adapt and change and grab the opportunities are the ones that are going to thrive. And I think we've got a wonderful opportunity now to start to look at organisations in a different way to create. I've never been a big fan of the concept of work-life balance. For me, it's work often is your life, isn't it? You spend a lot of time doing it. So let's create organisations that's really enjoyable, purposeful. Feeling connected, feeling involved, feel that you're adding value and recognise what you do. Let's create cultures that almost like move away from this command and control and thousands of KPIs and so much pressure and I often think about that. There's so many people under so much pressure because they've got to hit these targets, but no one actually talks about what we need to do to hit the targets. And I think it's such a shame, that for me, they're performance measures. So for me, it's about inputs rather than outputs. The outputs will come if we do the right things. So I think sometimes it's a little shift to help people realize that, if you do the right things, yeah, a lot of managers I'm working with at the moment are saying, do you and do your teams really know the 2 or 3 things you need to be world class at to do in your role? Not really. Well, how many KPIs you got? Oh, thousands. Okay, so people are really confused, aren't they, about what they should do? So go back to this word clarity, I think is really, really important because the clarity then gives you the confidence, and that confidence then helps people to perform at a higher level. So. Yeah, I'm really excited. As long as there are organisations that are embracing this new way of working, and I guess the Future Work Forum, that's part of our job, isn't it? Is to get out there and start to get people thinking differently and to educate and almost like show there is a better way.
Yes, yeah, brilliant. Okay, I think that's it. That's a great way to end this discussion, being
Thank you.
positive about the future,
Yeah,
looking ahead. It's been a great conversation. Thank you very much, Graham, and we'll
thank you.
keep working together.
My pleasure.
Bye for now.